Now, poll numbers are showing that Trump and Harris are locked in a tight race with just, can you believe it, 18 days left until the election. Harris is up by 1.5 points according to the Real Clear Politics polling average, but the betting markets are telling a different story, Emily.
A very, very different story, Beau. Prediction markets like Polymarket, where voters can gamble on their preferred candidate's chances of winning, have been rising in popularity, and Trump is favored to win by a much bigger margin than we're seeing in the polls.
That's true, Emily. And the thing about it is like, what is your take on that? Because we don't advocate gambling. We have to just say that at the outset. But the betting men and women out there, are they knowing something that we are not seeing? Is it a reaction, would you say, Emily, a more immediate reaction perhaps to last night's interview?
Absolutely. You know, Beau, I think in the betting markets, they're able to react so much quicker to breaking news, right? With the polls, you have to wait for all of that data to be collected, for the polls to actually go out. But with this betting market and being able to see how much Trump has been able to rise, I mean, we were checking earlier in the week, he had about a 60% chance of winning. Now he's at like 67%. That just keeps going up and up every day. And I think things like that Fox News interview with Kamala and Bret Baier, as I said earlier in the show, was quite the train wreck. I think that definitely inspired more people to bet on Trump and his chances of winning.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And so, Emily, as I was thinking about watching that interview this morning in retrospect, 27 minutes long. My understanding is that she was supposed to appear for an hour. She came in late. She left early. There were 4 handlers telling Bret Baier to wrap it up. And I considered it a tense interview, a belligerent interview, if you will. I think she got angry. And whatever voters she was trying to sway, in my opinion, she didn't sway a single one of them because she came across more poorly with each minute. What do you think, Emily?
I think you're absolutely correct. And I do want to point this out as well. Beau, do you remember this was earlier in the summer when everyone in the mainstream media was calling Biden sharp as a tack. I mean, we saw all these headlines, sharp as a tack, sharp as a tack. They're doing the same thing to try to clean up all the damage that she did in that interview on Fox yesterday. They're calling it a testy interview. I mean, there was headlines all morning long. CNN, AP, they were all saying the same word, testy. And so my question is, do all of these journalists, right, do they all just use the same word? They all thought about this word testy as a way to describe this? Or Beau, is this a DNC talking point that they're just peddling to the mainstream media?
I think that it is. And you know what, Emily? We actually have a guest right now joining us to talk about this very thing. So we want to welcome in Ian Haworth, the host, to discuss. Ian, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, Ian, so what we were just talking about, these numbers on Polymarket, they just continue to go up and up for Trump. Earlier this week, I just mentioned this, he had a 60% chance of winning, and checking again today, he's even higher. So do you think this is a more accurate indication of the state of the presidential race than what we're seeing in the polls?
I mean, I certainly like to think so. The polls have been really, really difficult to use as actual indication of what the country is thinking. I mean, clearly Vegas knows what it's doing. You know, they've made billions upon billions of dollars for a reason. I think, though, another metric here is just how Kamala Harris and her campaign have been reacting. They're clearly in full pack mode. I mean, you got that video of Joe Biden and Obama whispering to each other in kind of a little panicked tone. But you've also got her trying to really pander to communities that she thought she had in the bag, like trying to basically bribe black men into voting for her, all these kind of things. It's clear they're panicking, and I don't think the Democrats would be panicking if they thought this was going to be an easy one. So I think certainly these odds indicate something is going on. There's still quite a lot of time left until the election, of course, so we have to be careful, but certainly a lot to be positive about.
Yeah, Ian, the takeaway that I took when I was watching it, I think it was something like 7 minutes in, and she still had not answered that first question Bret had about immigration. She just tends to not be able to answer questions other than the rehearsed lines of, let me be clear. That's one she always says. And also when Bret pressed her about, it's been 3.5 years. What's the page you're turning? And she couldn't answer the question. What was your biggest takeaway from this interview last night?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was kind of, there was one positive for Kamala Harris is that she actually went on TV and actually had a difficult interview. But again, this is because she feels she has to. She's worried that she's losing, so this is the panic mode. And again, we're being reminded that she's simply not good at this. If you actually read the transcript, you see how spectacularly bad she is. She just makes things up. She waffles on. She talks about Donald Trump whenever she possibly can. And she's trying to really shove down the American people's throats the idea that she's come a new, fresh face that's going to be the face of change when she's been in office for 3.5 years. And she has no answer for that. Every single policy she's saying is broken. She's talking about broken immigration policy. She broke it. Like, she has absolutely nothing to run on. And I think when she actually faces a real journalist in this case, she falls apart. And so I think you can see why they were trying to wrap that up as quickly as possible, trying to drag her off the set practically, because it just didn't go well for her, because we saw the real Kamala Harris.
And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out as people continue to cast their ballots. We know that early voting has started in a few states across the country, and we are keeping a close eye on Georgia. It's one of the key battlegrounds that could ultimately determine this election. And they've just reported their second day of record-breaking early voting. The state's election office confirms that more than 500,000 people have already cast their ballots in Georgia. So do you think that this massive turnout in the early days here is going to benefit Republicans or Democrats more?
Yeah, I mean, historically, it benefits Democrats. If we look at previous elections, usually early voters tend to be Democrats and the people who vote on the day tend to be Republicans. But honestly, who knows? Like, this election is different in many ways. If we just look at the collapse of the economy, the fact that Kamala Harris replaced someone who was dragged out in the middle of the night, Soviet style. And so I think there's not much we can go on. I think we may actually have a lot of people who are Republicans who are early voting simply because like they want to get involved too. But I think it's time. The only way we're going to know, honestly, no one really knows. The only way we're going to know is when results start coming in. My real problem is I'm not a huge fan of this early voting nonsense because it's multiple weeks where we could potentially get more information. And so that's why usually you see Democrats pushing people as hard as possible to vote early, because then less information for them is good. You don't have 2-3 more weeks of Kamala Harris putting a foot in her mouth when people have already voted for her. They don't really care at that point. So I think in the future, if this does blow up in Republicans' face, we really need to either get on the early voting game a little more or try and reduce the levels of early voting we've allowed to become the norm.
Yeah, and Ian, before we let you go, we want to get back to this Harris interview with Fox. Obviously, immigration was a big topic on it. Bret Baier pushed and pushed and pushed, and it seemed like she couldn't answer any of his questions. But you are an immigrant to this country, and you came here to the United States from the UK. So what is your reaction to her incompetence when it comes to immigration policy that she seems to just fail on miserably time after time?
Well, I think if you speak to any legal immigrant in this country, is they have as much, if not more, love for America as anyone else, because they came here for a reason. I came here for a reason. I came here because America is the best country in the world, and it offered me the kind of opportunities I could never dream of anywhere else. But I also came here legally with a respect for the system and not with an expectation to be given things. And if you look at the scourge of illegal immigration, a lot of it is built on not only the promises that the Biden and Harris administration gave of free housing, free education, free healthcare, free transition surgery for transgender people, all of this nonsense. But it's also the idea of what America owes you. America doesn't owe you anything except the opportunity to build a better life yourself. And I think that's really at the heart of this issue. And it's something that, you know, Kamala Harris is the face of. Again, she's the face of what she wants new America to be, which is a lot more like Europe, of what is the country going to give you. And that's really not what America is.
Absolutely. And I think immigration is going to be a key issue in the next 18 days before the election. We really appreciate you joining the show to share some insight with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ian.